The worst part isn't the sound of the footsteps. It's the silence that follows when I know they should be there. I'm sitting in my living room right now, the only light coming from the street lamp outside, and I can hear someone breathing in the hallway. Not my breath. Theirs. A heavy, wet, rhythmic sound that seems to vibrate the very air of this house. And I know, with a cold, hollow certainty that has stripped the marrow from my bones, that I brought this into my house. I was the one who ignored the shadows in the rearview mirror. I was the one who told myself the flickering lights in the warehouse were just old wiring. I invited this in, and now I'm beginning to realize that it has no intention of ever leaving. My name is Elias, and for the last 3 years I've worked the graveyard shift at North Star Cold Storage in northern Ohio. It's a sprawling, windowless monolith of corrugated steel and reinforced concrete, tucked away in an industrial park where the grass grows through the cracks in the asphalt, and the only neighbors are a pallet recycling plant and a graveyard of rusted shipping containers. My job is simple, mind-numbing, and lonely. I'm a night shift floor supervisor, which mostly means I walk miles of concrete aisles, checking the temperature gauges on massive industrial freezers and ensuring that the automated picking systems haven't jammed. The warehouse is a world of artificial winter. Inside the main lockers, the temperature stays at a constant 10 degrees below zero. You can feel the moisture in your nostrils freeze the second you step through the heavy, insulated plastic curtains. The sound in there is a constant, low-frequency thrum, the heartbeat of the compressors, interrupted only by the occasional metallic groan of the racking as it settles under the weight of thousands of pounds of frozen beef and poultry. I spend my nights wrapped in a heavy, high-visibility parka, my breath a constant white plume in front of my face. My shift runs from 10:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m. By the time I clock out, the world is usually a dull charcoal gray. That's the thing about the night shift. You live in the margins. You see the world when it's empty, when the only people on the road are long-haul truckers and people with secrets. I live in a small 1940s bungalow on the outskirts of Elyria. It's a modest house, with thin walls and floorboards that scream whenever you take a step. I bought it because it was quiet, and when you work nights, quiet is the only currency that matters. The drive home usually takes about 25 minutes. I take Route 42, a two-lane highway that cuts through patches of dense woods and abandoned farmland. At 6:10 in the morning, the road is a desolate stretch of blacktop illuminated by the sickly orange glow of sodium vapor lamps. You get used to the isolation. You start to find comfort in the way your headlights catch the eyes of deer standing at the tree line. You start to think you're the only soul left on the planet. The first strange incident happened on a Tuesday in late October. The air had turned brittle, and a thin, icy mist was clinging to the road. I had just finished a particularly grueling shift. One of the main compressors had failed around 2:00 a.m., and I'd spent 4 hours in the sub-zero lockers helping the repair crew. By the time I reached my car, a silver sedan with a heater that took 10 minutes to kick in, I was exhausted to the point of nausea. I pulled out of the North Star lot, the gravel crunching under my tires. As I turned onto Route 42, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. One headlight, actually. A Cyclops. It was a faded Navy sedan, maybe an old Crown Vic, sitting a respectable distance back. I didn't think much of it. It's a public road. But as I passed the first 5-mile marker, I realized the car hadn't gained or lost an inch of ground. It stayed perfectly synced with my speed. When I slowed down to 35, it slowed down. When I sped up to 60, it sped up. I felt a small, cold prickle of unease at the base of my neck. I tried to dismiss it. I was tired. I was hallucinating from the cold and the lack of caffeine. To test it, I pulled into a 24-hour Shell station, a brightly lit island in the sea of dark trees. I didn't need gas, but I wanted to see if the Cyclops followed. The Navy sedan didn't pull in. It kept going, disappearing into the mist. I sat at the pump for a moment, my heart rate slowing down, feeling like an idiot. "You're losing it, Elias," I whispered to the dashboard. I bought a stale coffee and finished the drive home without another thought. but when I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, I heard it. The sound of a car idling just out of sight down the street where the street lamp had burnt out weeks ago. I sat in my dark car listening. The idle was rough, a rhythmic, metallic clicking sound like a loose fan belt. Then, after 30 seconds, the sound faded as the car slowly rolled away. No headlights came on. It just drifted into the dark. I went inside, locked the door, and went straight to bed. I told myself it was a neighbor. I told myself it was the wind. But I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house groan, wondering why my shoes, which I always leave by the door, seemed to have been moved 3 inches to the left. The next few weeks were a slow-motion descent into madness. The incidents were subtle, the kind of things you can explain away if you're desperate enough to remain sane. At work, I started hearing things. I'd be walking down aisle 14, the furthest reach of the warehouse, and I'd hear a metallic clack. It sounded like a locker door closing, but the break room was 300 yards away through 2 sets of airlocks. I began to feel a presence in the lockers. Not a ghost. I don't believe in that, but a physical weight. Like someone was standing just around the corner of the next racking unit, watching me. I'd whip my head around, my flashlight beam cutting through the freezing mist, but there would be nothing but stacks of frozen boxes and the hum of the compressors. One night around 3:00 a.m., I found something in the snow just outside the loading docks. We'd had a light dusting an hour prior. There in the pristine white powder was a single set of footprints. They led from the dark tree line at the edge of the property, right up to the heavy steel door of the guard shack, and then they just stopped. They didn't turn around. They didn't lead to another door. They stopped right at the threshold, as if whoever had made them had simply stepped into the wall. I went to the guard, a kid named Marcus who usually spent his shift watching Netflix on his tablet. "Marcus, you see anyone come by the door in the last hour?" He looked up blinking. "No, man, it's been dead. Why?" "There are tracks out there," I said, gesturing toward the door. He shrugged, bored. "Probably a driver checking the lock, or a fox. I didn't hear anything." I walked back inside, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. It followed me through the airlocks. It followed me into the manager's office. It followed me into the bathroom. Then the gifts started. I call them gifts because I don't know what else to call them. It started with a pack of cigarettes. I smoke a specific, off-brand menthol that I buy at the Shell station. One morning, after the drive home, I found an empty, crushed pack of those exact cigarettes sitting on my welcome mat. I hadn't smoked in my yard in days. The pack was wet, as if it had been held in a sweaty palm for a long time. A week later, I found a small, frozen bird on my back deck. It was a sparrow, its neck snapped cleanly. It hadn't been attacked by a cat. It had been placed there, its wings tucked neatly against its sides, its frozen eyes staring up at my kitchen window. I stopped sleeping during the day. I'd lie in bed, my eyes grainy and burning, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. The daytime is supposedly safe, but for a night shift worker, the day is just a more brightly lit version of the dark. I started hearing footsteps in the attic. Not the scurrying of squirrels, but the slow, heavy, rhythmic thud of a person shifting their weight. I climbed up there once, armed with a kitchen knife and a flashlight. The attic was empty, save for some old insulation and dusty boxes. But I found a spot near the vent where the dust had been wiped away. A space about the size of a grown man, where someone had been sitting, staring down through the cracks in the floorboards directly into my bedroom. That was the moment the paranoia took root. It wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a physical sensation, like a layer of grease on my skin. I stopped eating. I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. My coworkers started to notice. "Elias, you look like hell," my manager, Sarah, told me one night. "You need to take some PTO. You're twitchy." "I'm fine," I snapped, my voice sounding like gravel. "Just not sleeping well, the neighbor's dog." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes full of a pity that made me want to scream. "There are no neighbors on your stretch of the road, Elias, just the woods." I walked away before she could say more. I didn't want to admit she was right. I didn't want to admit that the silence of my life had been invaded by something I couldn't see. The drive home became a gauntlet of fear. The Navy sedan with the single headlight was a permanent fixture now. It wouldn't follow me every night, that would be too predictable. Instead, it would appear once every 3 or 4 days. It would sit at the edge of my vision, a silent shadow in the mist. I started taking different routes. I'd drive 30 miles out of my way, weaving through the back streets of Lorraine and Amherst, but eventually I'd look in the mirror and there it would be. One light. One cyclops eye. I began to hallucinate from the sleep deprivation. I'd be driving and see a figure, standing in the middle of the road, only to blink and realize it was a signpost. I'd hear my name whispered in the static of the radio. I started boarding up the windows from the inside. I told myself it was to keep the light out so I could sleep, but really, I just wanted to stop looking at the dark. I bought a home security system, the kind you can monitor from your phone. I stayed up all day watching the feed of my front porch. I saw nothing. No Navy sedan, no man in a parka, just the wind blowing the dead leaves across the driveway. But then I checked the event history. Every day around 2:00 p.m. the camera would trigger. The footage would show my front door. Nothing would happen for 30 seconds. Then the door handle would slowly, silently turn. It would turn all the way to the right, hold for 3 seconds, and then slowly turn back. Whoever was doing it knew exactly where the camera was. They never showed their face. They never stood in the frame. Just a hand wearing a dark industrial glove, the kind we use at the warehouse, reaching in from the edge of the screen. I stopped going to work. I called in sick, then I just stopped answering the phone. I spent my nights sitting in the middle of my living room, the only light coming from the blue glow of my security monitor. I had a crowbar across my lap. I had the doors double-bolted. I had the windows nailed shut. I felt like I was in a submarine, miles beneath the surface, waiting for the hull to crush. The psychological tension was a constant, high-pitched ringing in my ears. I began to doubt everything. Was it Marcus from work? Was it a disgruntled driver? Was it someone I'd cut off in traffic months ago? I replayed every interaction I'd had in the last year, searching for a spark of malice. I found nothing. I was a ghost. I didn't have enemies. But someone had chosen me. Someone had followed me home from the night shift, and they were playing a long game. The climax happened on a Friday. A massive storm was rolling off Lake Erie, a gale of November that brought horizontal rain and wind that sounded like a freight train. The power flickered and then died around 10:00 p.m., plunging the house into a blackness so total it felt physical. I sat in my chair, the crowbar tight in my hands. Without the security monitor, I was blind. I was back to relying on my ears, and the storm was making that impossible. The wind was howling through the eaves, the rain was lashing the siding, and the house was groaning under the pressure. Around 2:00 a.m. I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. Clicking. The sound of a lock being turned from the inside. My heart didn't race, it stopped. I didn't breathe. I sat perfectly still, my eyes wide, staring toward the kitchen. The kitchen door, the one that led to the basement, was behind me. I hadn't checked the basement. I had boarded the windows and bolted the doors, but I hadn't checked the basement. The basement had a small, coal chute window that I'd forgotten about. It was hidden behind a stack of old tires in the yard. It was large enough for a thin man to squeeze through. I heard the basement door creak open. It was a slow, agonizing sound, the hinges screaming in the dark. Step, step, step. The footsteps were heavy. They were wet. I could hear the squelch of waterlogged boots on the linoleum. The smell hit me then. It wasn't a monster smell. It was the smell of my life. It was the smell of North Star cold storage, the scent of industrial ammonia, frozen cardboard, and stale coffee. Whoever was in the house had been in the warehouse. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I was paralyzed by a primal, lizard-brain terror. I watched my own shadow on the wall, cast by the faint light of the street lamp outside. A second shadow joined mine. It was tall. It was wearing a high-visibility parka, the silver reflective strips glowing in the dark. It was holding something, a long, thin object. "Elias," a voice whispered. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It was a dry, rasping sound, like wind through dead leaves. "You forgot to clock out," the voice said. I gripped the crowbar and swung. I didn't look. I just swung with every ounce of desperate, terrified strength I had left. The metal connected with something solid, a shoulder, maybe a head. I heard a grunt and the sound of someone hitting the floor. I didn't stay to finish it. I ran. I dived through the living room window, the boards I'd nailed up splintering under my weight. The glass shattered, tearing at my arms and face, but I didn't feel it. I hit the wet grass and rolled, sprinting toward my car. I fumbled with my keys, my hands slick with blood and rain. I looked back at the house. The front door was wide open. Standing in the doorway was a figure. They weren't moving. They were just standing there, framed by the dark interior of my home. The reflective strips on their parka glinted in the rain. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it. I didn't look back until I reached the Shell station. I sat in the parking lot, the engine screaming, the windshield wipers batting away the rain, and I screamed until my lungs gave out. The police came. They searched the house. They found the broken window, the blood on the floor, and the crowbar. But they didn't find him. They found evidence that someone had been living in my basement for at least 3 weeks. They found a sleeping bag made of stolen packing blankets from North Star. They found a collection of my trash, discarded mail, empty cigarette packs, a coffee cup with my DNA on it. They found a viewing port, cut into the floorboards directly beneath my favorite chair. But there was no one there. The coal chute window was open, a muddy trail leading into the woods behind the house. The Navy sedan was found abandoned in a ditch 3 miles away. It had been reported stolen in Michigan 2 months prior. Inside the car, the police found a logbook. It was my life. Every day was recorded. 10:04 p.m. Elias leaves for work. 10:29 p.m. Elias enters North Star. 6:12 a.m. Elias leaves North Star. 6:38 a.m. Elias enters home. There were notes on my habits. Elias drinks 3 cups of coffee. Elias likes menthol. Elias doesn't look in the rearview mirror enough. The last entry was dated that night. 2:14 a.m. Elias is waiting in the dark. It's time to say hello. I never went back to that house. I never went back to North Star Cold Storage. I moved 2 states away, to a high-rise apartment in a city where the lights never go out and there are people everywhere. I work a 9-to-5 job in an office with bright windows and a security desk in the lobby. But the trauma isn't something you leave behind. It's a permanent change in the architecture of your soul. I don't sleep well. I have 3 different locks on my bedroom door. I have cameras in every corner of my apartment. I spend my nights watching the feed, searching for the reflective glint of a parka. Every time I see a car with one headlight, my heart stops. Every time I hear a floorboard creak, I reach for the knife I keep under my pillow. The police never caught him. They don't even have a name. To them, he was just a transient with an obsession, a ghost in a parka. But I know the truth. He didn't want to kill me. If he did, he could have done it a dozen times while I was sleeping or walking through the empty warehouse. He wanted me to know. He wanted to strip away the illusion of safety. He wanted to show me that the world I lived in, the world of routines and schedules and locked doors, was just a fragile shell. I'll be sitting in my office, surrounded by the hum of copiers and the chatter of coworkers, and I'll feel it. That cold draft on the back of my neck. That sense that someone is standing just around the corner watching me. I'll be driving down a busy city street at noon, and I'll look in the mirror. and for a split second, I'll see a navy sedan. The fear never leaves. It just settles into the cracks. Sometimes I find things. A month ago, I found a single, crushed menthol cigarette on the floor of my new car. I hadn't smoked in a year. 2 weeks ago, I found a small, frozen bird on the windowsill of my 12th floor apartment. And last night I was lying in bed, the city lights reflecting off the ceiling. The apartment was quiet, the locks were secure, the cameras were active. Then I heard a sound from the hallway. A dry, rasping whisper. Elias. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I sat perfectly still, my eyes wide, staring at the door. You still haven't clocked out, the voice said. I realized then that it doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter how many locks I have or how many lights I turn on. Something followed me home from the night shift, and it's been with me ever since. It's in the silence of the room. It's in the rhythm of my heart. It's in the very air I breathe. I am no longer the man I was. I am a ghost inhabiting a body that belongs to someone else. I am a prisoner of a shadow that never fades. The night shift never ends, not really. I'm sitting here now in the dark writing this. I can hear the footsteps in the hallway. They're slow, they're heavy, they're wet. Step, step, step. I can smell the ammonia. I can feel the cold. I'm looking at the door. The handle is starting to turn, slowly, silently. I'm not going to run this time. I'm not going to scream. I'm just going to wait. Because when you live in the margins, eventually, the dark comes for you. And when it does, there are no more explanations. There are no more rationalizations. There is only the silence. And the sound of someone else's breath, synchronized perfectly with yours. In, out. Hello, Elias, the dark says. And finally, I say hello back. The end isn't a bang. It's not a scream. It's just the clicking of a lock being turned from the inside, and the realization that the person you've been running from is the only one who truly knows who you are. I am the night shift, and the night shift is me. The reflections on the high-rise windows are starting to fade. The city lights are flickering. The world is turning charcoal gray. It's 6:00 a.m. Time to go home. But I'm already there. The door handle finishes its turn. The door begins to open. And in the darkness of the hallway, I see a glint of reflective silver. I don't look away, I can't. Because something followed me home, and it's finally time to see its face. The air in the room drops 30 degrees. My breath plumes in the dark. The smell of frozen cardboard and stale coffee is overwhelming. The figure steps into the room. It's tall. It's wearing a high-visibility parka. It reaches out a hand, a dark, industrial-gloved hand. Elias, it rasps. I reach back. The silence is total. The story of Elias ends here, in the cold and the dark, in the margins where the night shift never ends. If you work the graveyard shift, if you drive the empty highways at 6:00 in the morning, if you live in the quiet places where the silence is too loud, look in your rearview mirror. Check your shoes by the door. Listen to the footsteps in the attic. Because something might be following you home, too. And it's a long, long drive into the dark. I can hear the compressors humming. I can feel the ice in my nostrils. The shift is over. But I'm not leaving. I'm staying here in the artificial winter with the Cyclops and the parka. I am the shadow in the warehouse. I am the whisper in the static. I am the thing that followed me home. And we're never, ever going to leave. The city lights are gone. The high-rise is gone. There is only North Star cold storage stretching out into the eternity of the night. I walk down aisle 14. The floorboards don't squeak here. The concrete is silent. I turn the corner of the racking. There I am, standing in the mist, waiting for myself. Elias, I say. Hello, I respond. And finally, the night is complete. The compressors thrum, the meat settles, the ice grows. Silence. Darkness. The night shift is forever. I think back to the world of the sun. It seems like a dream now, a flickering, overexposed film that I can barely remember. The people, the chatter, the warm air, it was all an illusion. This is the truth. The cold is the truth. The isolation is the truth. I used to be afraid of the Navy sedan. I used to be afraid of the footsteps. Now, I realize they were just invitations. They were signals from the reality I belonged to, calling me back from the brightly lit lie I was trying to live. I look at my hands, they're pale, almost translucent. My breath is a steady, frozen cloud. I don't feel the cold anymore. I am the cold. I walk to the coal chute window and look out at the bungalow. It looks small, pathetic, like a child's toy left out in the rain. I see the boards on the windows. I see the shattered glass. I see the man I used to be, huddled in the car, screaming into the storm. He's so far away. He's a memory of a memory. I turn back to the warehouse. Marcus is in the guard shack, his tablet glowing in the dark. He doesn't see me. He never sees me. I walk past him, my high-visibility strips glinting, and I step into the curtains. The compressors groan, the racks click. I find my spot, the spot near the vent where the dust has been wiped away. I sit down. I wait. I listen to the heartbeat of the building. In, out. It's 10:00 p.m. The next shift is starting. I hear a car pull into the gravel lot. I hear the door slam. I hear the crunch of boots on the asphalt. A man walks into the warehouse. He's wearing a heavy parka. He's carrying a flashlight. He looks tired. He looks like he hasn't slept in weeks. He walks down aisle 1. He checks the gauges. He breath plumes in the air. He doesn't know I'm here, not yet. But he will. He'll hear a metallic clack in aisle 14. He'll find a crushed cigarette pack on his welcome mat. He'll see one headlight in his rearview mirror. And then he'll follow me home. Because the night shift needs a supervisor. And I've been waiting for a replacement. I lean forward, my reflective strips catching the dim light of the overhead fluorescence. Elias, I whisper. The man freezes. He whips his head around, his flashlight beam cutting through the mist. He sees nothing. But he feels it, the grease on his skin, the weight in the air, the cold in his marrow. He turns and runs toward the manager's office. I smile, a dry, rasping smile. Run, Elias, drive the back roads, bolt the doors. It won't matter. I'm already in the basement. I'm already under your chair. I'm already your heartbeat. Welcome to the margins. The night is just beginning. And something is following you home. I look up at the rafters where the frost is thick and white. The warehouse is a cathedral of ice, and I am its silent priest. The compressors are my choir. I think about the sparrow on the back deck. I think about the way its neck felt when it snapped, a clean, honest sound. No lies, no illusions, just the reality of the end. That's what I'm offering him. That's what I'm offering the world, the truth of the end. The man is in his car now. I can hear the engine idling. I can hear the rough, metallic click of the fan belt. I step out of the warehouse. The Navy sedan is waiting in the ditch, but it doesn't need to stay there. It's a ghost car, and ghosts can go anywhere. I get in, I turn on the light. One light. I pull out of the lot, the gravel crunching. I find him on Route 42. He's driving fast, weaving through the mist. I stay exactly 3 cars back. He slows down, I slow down. He speeds up, I speed up. I see him look in his rearview mirror. I see the terror in his eyes. Don't worry, Elias, I whisper to the dashboard. I'm just making sure you get home safe. The mist clings to the car. The orange lights of the sodium lamps pass by like ticking seconds. The bungalow is ahead. The Cedar Street sign is flickering. He pulls into his driveway. He runs inside. I park down the street, where the street lamp is burnt out. I turn off the light. I sit in the dark, listening to the rough idle. In 30 seconds, I'll roll away. In an hour, I'll be in his basement. In a week, I'll be in his head. The night shift is a long game, and I have all the time in the world. The snow starts to fall, a light dusting of white powder. I get out of the car. I walk toward the bungalow. I leave a single set of footprints. They lead from the dark tree line right up to the front door. I stop at the threshold. I reach out a dark, industrial-gloved hand. I turn the handle. Slowly, silently, click. The door is open. I'm home, I say. The silence responds with a wet, heavy breath. And the cycle begins again. Night after night, shift after shift. Until there is nothing left but the cold. The freezer compressors hum. The reflecting strips glint. The Cyclops' eye watches. Something followed me home. And I'm so glad it did. Because being alone is the only thing truly worth fearing. And now I'll never be alone again. I look at the man in the bed. He's staring at the ceiling, his eyes wide and grainy. He's listening to the house groan. He thinks he's safe. He doesn't know that I'm the one making the house groan. I'm the settling foundation. I'm the wind in the eaves. I'm the squeak in the floorboard. I lean over him, my breath a white plume in the dark. Time to wake up, Elias, I whisper. The night shift is starting. He screams. It's a beautiful sound. The end.